Hi everyone, welcome into another episode of Matt Sports Talk. And I know I am a little bit late in recording this, and I'd hoped to upload this by this point, but it took a little bit longer than I expected because I've been working over the last roughly about an hour and a half going over all of the information. And now I mentioned yesterday that today I will be recording a very special episode going over with you where all of the teams will be, all 64 teams that will be picked to be in the national tournament. Of course, we are literally 5 hours, actually about 4 hours, 55 minutes away from Selection Show Thursday. That will be at 8 o'clock. It's currently 5 after 3. And I mentioned yesterday that I'd be recording an episode going over all the teams that for sure would be in via either an automatic bid or teams for an at-large bid, where all the seeding lines would be roughly between all those teams. And that is why I'm recording this episode. This is my really a very special episode to be recording. This is the very first year that I've done this, and I plan on doing this every single year. So this is, we're here. We are here. I'm super excited about sharing all this content with you. And I know I briefly mentioned it yesterday, and so without further ado, we are going to dive into that, and I'm going to be doing this every single year moving forward. This is the final episode before recapping all of the opening round matchups just for the Crossroads League schools next weekend when the first and second rounds get underway next Friday and Saturday. So again, make sure that you subscribe down below if you have not done so already so you do not miss out on any of this important information moving forward over the next roughly about 3 weeks or so with all this national tournament stuff. And I will also be printing out a completed bracket, and I'll be updating that after each individual round, showing you how well I've done, just like I did last year. Last year was my first year of doing that. Super excited about this year. So in my first piece of paper that I have, we are going to be going over all of the teams that have clinched automatic bids, and these are teams that either won the regular season in their respective conference, or teams that either won their conference tournament if it was a different team, or if it was the same team that won the regular season, then whoever finished in second place in the regular season would get the second automatic bid if the same team won the regular season and conference tournament in that respective conference. So your automatic bids are as follows. You have Columbia, they're out of the AMC. Milligan, they're out of the Appalachian. You also have Corbin, they're out of the Cascade. Olivet Nazarene, MSCCAC. Marion, out of the Crossroads League. St. Francis, Indiana, out of the Crossroads League. Dakota State, out of the Frontier. Dort, out of the GPAC. Dakota Wesleyan, also out of the GPAC. Dakota Wesleyan was the runner-up in the conference tournament to Dort. Actually, Dakota Wesleyan won the GPAC conference tournament, but still they got an automatic bid despite that, or even before that game started. Then your other automatic bids are Mid-America Nazarene, and they are out of the Hart Conference. Evangel, they're out of the KCAC. You also have LSU Shreveport, they're out of the Red River. Texas A&M San Antonio gets the second automatic bid out of that conference because they are the second highest team in their respective arc in the Red River. So that there's an automatic bid there. Rio Grande out of the River States. Brescia got the second automatic bid because of Rio Grande also winning that, or meaning Rio Grande also getting to the conference tournament. That's how Brescia got the second auto bid in that conference. Langston out of the Sooner, they won the regular season. Loyola out of Louisiana, they won the regular season. William Carey out of Loyola's in the Southern States, Langston's in the Sooner. William Carey out of the Southern States. William Carey won that conference tournament, so they get the second auto bid. Indiana Tech, they won the WAC regular season. Rochester Christian, they were the runners-up in the WAC conference tournament to Indiana Tech, so Rochester Christian gets the second automatic bid. Southeastern out of the Sun. Williams Baptist got the second auto bid out of the AMC because they were the number 2 seed behind Columbia. We also have Mid-America Christian out of the Sooner. They got the second automatic bid because they won the Sooner Conference Championship. We also have, I mentioned Brescia, Montana Tech out of the Frontier. They won the Frontier Conference Tournament, so they get the second automatic bid. Then Rust out of the HBCU, they got the automatic bid after winning the HBCU conference tournament. Haskell Indian Nations got an auto bid out of, I believe they're in the not the Cal Pack. I know Simpson got an automatic bid out of the Cal Pack. Haskell Indian Nation is out of the Continental, out of the CAC. They got an automatic bid, and then I mentioned Texas A&M San Antonio. Talladega got the second automatic bid out of the HBCU. Freight Hardman got an auto bid out of the Mid-South. I mentioned Simpson out of the Cal Pack. Bethel, Kansas out of the KCAC got the second automatic bid because Mid-America Nazarene won the regular season. So therefore, Bethel out of Kansas got the second automatic bid because they were the number 2 seed in the regular season. Hope International won the GSAC conference title, the Great Southwest Athletic Conference. They beat Arizona Christian on nearly a buzzer beater. And then Bryan out of Tennessee, they got the second auto bid in the Appalachian because of Milligan winning the regular season as well as winning the Appalachian Conference title. Eastern Oregon, they got the second automatic bid out of the Cascade behind Corbin because Corbin also won the Cascade regular season. They won the Cascade Conference tournament titles. Therefore, Eastern Oregon gets the second automatic bid because they were the number 2 seed in the regular season. And Grandview out of the Hart, they get the second automatic bid because they were the number 2 seed in the Hart regular season, and also because Mid-America Nazarene won the regular season conference title as well. So therefore, Grandview gets the second automatic bid there. So that does it for all of the automatic bids in terms of teams. Now this is something I'm really excited about. We are going to be looking at, this is not an official bracket. This is just not really a prediction, but just a general guideline of where I think everybody is going to be seated in terms of who all the number 1 seeds are, who the 2 seeds will be, the 3 seeds all the way down the line. And again, this is not an official tournament bracket. This is just, and again, we're not predicting who's going to play where. I just think, and of course my brother also helped me with this. So this is my general prediction of all the seed lines, who's going to be seated where, and who, of course, and this also takes into account who the host sites are. And of course, the host sites, we have Faulkner, Spring Arbor, Friends out of Kansas. We also have Evangel out of Missouri, Mid-America Naz out of Kansas, Rio Grande, and we also have Dakota State, Dakota Wesleyan, Campbellsville, St. Francis of Indiana, Freed Hardman, Bethel, Tennessee, Dort, as well as Marion, and our other host sites. I want to make sure I got all the host sites. No, Georgetown is another host site, and okay, yeah, so we got all the host sites completed there. So of course, I'm going to start with the number 1 seeds. So, at least to me, the 4 number 1 seeds are going to be Freed Hardman, the number 1 overall seed, and then Bethel of Tennessee, Dort, and Marion. I really think those are going to be the 4 number 1 seeds. I know Dort lost to Dakota Wesleyan in the GPAC conference title. However, Dort's 29-2. Dakota Wesleyan, I believe, is 28-6. Or 28 and actually I think 28-4, maybe 27-5, somewhere in there. So again, I just cannot I just cannot see Dort not being a number 1 seed. So that is where I think they will be. And again, I'm super, super excited to share this content with you in this episode and getting this posted a few hours before the official selection show happens. So again, super, super excited to share all this with you. My number 2 seeds are going to be St. Francis out of Indiana, Campbellsville, Dakota Wesleyan, and Dakota State. And I just think that by St. Francis losing to Marion in the Crossroads League Tournament Championship game, I think that bumps St. Francis down to a 2 seed and allows Dort to move up from the 2 seed to a 1 seed. My 3 seeds are going to be Rio Grande, Evangel, Mid-America Nazarene, as well as Lindsey Wilson. Now, Lindsey Wilson's not hosting, and I'll explain more about them coming up here in just a minute. So those are my number 3 seeds. I know Rio Grande's 30-1. I just don't see them being below a 3 seed. I know they play kind of in a weak conference in the River States. However, I do think because of their record, I really think Rio is going to be a 3 seed, and I really don't have any doubts about that. But again, I'm not going to be 100% on this, and this is just a general overview, so to speak, of where I think all the seed lines generally will be. Again, it's not going to be perfect. I might be off by 1 or 2 seeds with all these teams. So again, please take this with a grain of salt when you are watching this video. So my number 4 seeds are going to be Loyola, Montana Tech, Corbin, and Columbia out of Missouri. None of those teams are hosting. So again, you would be sending all 4 of those teams somewhere. And then my 5 seeds are Lewis Clark State, who's hosting, Georgetown, who's hosting, Faulkner, who's hosting, and Friends out of Kansas, who's hosting. My 6 seeds are Spring Arbor, who's hosting, Eastern Oregon, Concordia out of Nebraska, Tennessee Southern. Right now, I really think Lindsey Wilson is going to be sent to Spring Arbor as the 3 seed because Lindsey Wilson's not hosting. So again, I think that's going to be a 3 versus 6. If Spring Arbor ends up playing Lindsey Wilson, I really think Lindsey Wilson will be going to Spring Arbor. And then my 7 seeds are Benedictine, Southeastern, Carroll, and Hastings. Again, I'm not going to dive into all of these teams where I think all these teams down here will go, at least not all of them. And then my 8 seeds are going to be LSU Shreveport, Langston, Mid-America Christian, and Cumberlands. I know Cumberlands is 19-11, so you may think, well, you might have them seeded a little bit too high. I totally understand that, but I think just because of their excellent strength of schedule, I know their overall record doesn't indicate it, but the Mid-South is one of the most competitive conferences in the whole country. So I just think that Cumberlands needs to be rewarded a little bit more for having a really, really high strength of schedule. So I have Cumberlands being in that number 8 line. And then in my number 9 lines, I have Olivet Nazarene, College of Idaho, Indiana Wesleyan, and Indiana Tech, all in that number 9 line. At least to me, I think if this does happen, and again, this might not happen. Now, in my personal, deep down in my personal opinion, I think Indiana Wesleyan is either going to be a 12 or an 11 and be sent either to Rio Grande or Georgetown. At least that's just, deep down my personal opinion. But for a brief overview, so to speak, of a mini bracket, I have them as a 9. I think that's a very real possibility that they're a 9 seed because you cannot overlook their top 8 strength of schedule in the whole country. If they are indeed a 9 seed, and again, I'm not perfect, this could change, so take this with a grain of salt. But if they are indeed a 9 seed, I think they are either going to Bethel out of Tennessee, a team that they already played this year, or they are going to Freed-Hardman. And Freed-Hardman is the number 1 overall seed. So maybe you could, or at least I think Freed-Hardman will be the number 1 overall seed. So you might think, okay, well, why would you send Indiana Wesleyan, a team at 17-13? Why would you put them in the Naismith quadrant, which is the best team quadrant out of the whole entire bracket? And I understand that. I totally understand that and understand your concern if you're saying, okay, well, wait a second, why would you put IWU in the Naismith quadrant? To me personally, I don't think they're going to be in the Naismith quadrant. I think I would have them. To me, I think they would be in I don't know exactly what quadrant they would be in, but I definitely think deep down that they are either going to be sent to Rio Grande as an 11 seed or sent to Georgetown as a 12. I think an 11 or 12 seed is more realistic for Indiana Wesleyan despite the really high strength of schedule that they have. But again, you never know, and I guess we can expect the unexpected, that is for sure. I definitely have them in, no question, even though their record isn't really good. However, 6 quad 1 wins, over 60% opponents' winning percentage, and again, a top 10 strength of schedule. You cannot overlook any of those things. So therefore, I think Indiana Wesleyan's for sure in. Again, to me, I would have them more along the lines of an 11 or 12. I would not have them as a 10. I just don't think that they should be a 9 I don't think they should be as high as a 9 or a 10 despite the top 8 strength of schedule. I think more realistically an 11 or 12. I think a 9 or a 10 is kind of, pushing the envelope, so to speak, but I would not be surprised if they end up being a 9 and sent to either Freed-Hardman or Bethel out of Tennessee. I don't think they're going to be sent to Dordt, as Dort's a number 1 seed, and obviously not Marion because Marion and Indiana Wesleyan play in the same conference. And then my 10 seeds are going to be Huntington out of Indiana, Bethel, Indiana, Milligan, and Grandview. I know some of you might say, okay, well, wait a second. Why do you have Bethel as a 10? Because I know Bethel's 20-10. However, they have won, I believe, 8 out of the last 10 or 11 games. They're one of the country's hottest teams going into the national tournament. I think you can reward them for being a top 10 seed. I for sure think that they are going to be a 10. I know Huntington, I know they lost 7 out of their last 8 games. I know that 4 out of those 8, they got beat by double digits or more. However, I know that they do have some excellent wins against Indiana Tech, 2 against Indiana Wesleyan, 1 against Taylor. And of course, they also have one against St. Xavier, but I don't think St. Xavier gets in. So again, I definitely would see Huntington and Bethel being in that number 10 line in the crossroads. Same for Milligan, same for Grandview. My 11 seeds are going to be St. Francis of Illinois, that got an automatic bid, as well as Southern Oregon, Rocky Mountain, and College of the Ozarks. I think those are going to be all your teams that are going to be in your 11 line. Again, Rocky Mountain, you could argue maybe they don't get in because they lost in their opening round of their conference tournament. Southern Oregon, St. Francis of Illinois, I think based on their strength of schedule as well as where they are in the RPI, I think those two teams definitely are a top 11. Same for the College of the Ozarks, because the Ozarks made it to the Sooner Athletic Tournament Championship game. They ended up losing that game to Mid-America Christian, but I definitely see College of the Ozarks being a top 11 seed because of the late run that they had. My number 12 seeds are Hope International, Nelson out of Texas, Bethel out of Kansas, and I do have, this could really surprise a lot of people. At 16 and 13, I have Northwestern out of Iowa being a 12 seed. I know they're in the GPAC. I know they are really, really on the bubble. I know their RPI isn't great, but they have an excellent strength of schedule. And I really think that they could, if they do get in, I think they definitely are on the 12 line, only because the GPAC is a super, super tough conference. And I just think that if Northwestern gets in, they definitely are going to be a 12 seed. I don't see them lower than the 12. I don't see them higher than the 12. So again, it's going to be interesting to see how all that plays out. My 13 seed lines are going to be Shawnee State, which I know might be surprising to some people. Shawnee State, they have an excellent strength of schedule. And again, I'm not saying that all this is going to happen for sure, because it more than likely won't. But Shawnee State has an excellent strength of schedule. I think they have an outside chance of getting in. St. Mary out of the KCAC. The only reason I have them getting in is because of Evangel beating Tabor in the KCAC Tournament Championship. If that had not happened, if Tabor had won that game against Evangel, then I would have St. Mary out. And I know this next team is going to probably shock some of you, and that is St. Thomas out of the Sun. I think they get in. I know their record doesn't indicate that, but they have an excellent strength of schedule. They play in the tough conference, and I think they do have a chance of getting in. I don't think it's a very high chance, but it is a possibility that they get in. My 14 seed lines are Texas A&M San Antonio, that got an auto bid, as well as Bryant out of Tennessee for an at-large, Oregon Tech out for an at-large, and Reinhardt out of the Appalachian as an at-large. Bryant and Reinhardt, I believe both are in the Appalachian. And I think I think those three teams, as well as Bryant, Oregon Tech, Reinhardt, I definitely see them as a 14 seed. Texas A&M San Antonio as a 14, only because they're the second rated, or the second highest in their arc in the Red River. So those are my views of the 14 line. The 15 lines, I have Rochester Christian, that got an auto bid out of the WAC. Williams Baptist, I think, gets in via an at-large. I also have Bercia. Of course, they got an automatic bid. I have them as a 15. And again, this one might surprise a lot of you too. I have Science of the Arts out of Chickasha, Oklahoma, getting in. I know they finished 6th in the Sooner. However, very, very tough conference. I know their record wasn't the greatest. However, I still think they get in. And if they do end up getting in, I definitely would have them as a 15. And then, of course, my 16 seed teams are all teams that got an automatic bid. Rust, Talladega, both out of the HBCU. Haskell Indian Nation out of the Continental. And Simpson out of the CalPAC. And those are all my 16 seed teams that got an automatic bid. So that is my, again, I did not mention any specific matchups for all these seeds, but this is just a general seeding guideline that I think could happen. I'm not saying that it does. It's not a guarantee. It might not end up happening this way, but it could. We don't know which way it's going to go, but this is a overview that I hope is super, super helpful and informative to you as you are following along from home, as we get closer and closer to the selection shows. Maybe you're at home, you're saying, okay, well, you know, who has a chance at being in? Where's the seeding line going? All that good stuff. And that's why I wanted to share this with you. This is my very, very first year in doing this, with sharing all the teams that I think are going to be on all of these seed lines. And then you might be wondering, okay, well, who are your first 4 out? Who's your next 4 out? My first 4 out is going to be Culver Stockton, as well as Governor State, Cumberland, and Montana State Northern. I know Montana State Northern made a deep run in the Frontier Tournament. They ended up losing in the second round. Cumberland, I know they have a top 7 strength of schedule, but you're down to almost 70th in the RPI. I don't think that gets you in. Governor State, I know you're 19 and 11. You play in a super tough conference. That the CCAC is in. I don't think that's enough to get you in because you lost to Olivet Nazarene, albeit by only a few. I think it was by 15 points. You lost to Olivet Nazarene in the CCAC tournament semifinal. So again, maybe that gets you in, maybe it does not. But I have Governor State among the first four out. Culver Stockton, they're 21-9. They play, I believe, in the KCAC. At least I think either that or the Heart. I can't remember which one off the top of my head, but I definitely have them the first four out. I think you're too far down in the RPI, and you don't have very good quad records either. So I definitely think that Culver Stockton is among the first four out. And then my next four out are going to be the Masters. Despite them being 18-8, I know this might be quite a shock to some of you, but I don't think they get in despite being 18-8 because their RPI is too low and they don't have an excellent quad record. So again, I don't think they get in. Life out of Georgia, I don't think they get in either. That's another team among my next four out. And Tabor, Tabor, however way it's pronounced or however you pronounce it, I have them among my next four out, and this is only because they made a super deep run in the KCAC tournament. They made it to a title game against number one seed Evangel, lost that game. Had they won that game, I think I would have them in, but because they did not, I definitely have them among my next four out. And then Providence out of Montana is going to be my eighth team that I have out. So again, that is a view of my prediction based on teams that going over teams that got auto bids, as well as where I think all the teams are going to be seated in terms of either auto bids or at-large bids. And again, that's not a guarantee. We're going to see what happens. And again, obviously take that with a grain of salt because it is not going to be 100% accurate. That's just a general guideline, so to speak, of what to expect. But again, maybe I'm correct with a lot of those seeds. Maybe I'm not. But for my first year in doing it, maybe I won't do too bad. We'll have to wait and see how that plays out. But that's going to do it for this video. And if you did enjoy it or you found this video super helpful and or informative to you, please either like, comment, or subscribe. Any one of those options helps me out greatly. I truly appreciate any feedback that you may provide me. Thanks so much for tuning into this video. And don't forget, tune into the selection show tonight. That's going to be at 7 o'clock Eastern for the men. And then the women, which is what I talked about, that's going to be at 8 o'clock Eastern, 7 Central, 6 Mountain, and 5 o'clock Pacific time. So make sure that you tune in for that. You can find that on the NAIA YouTube channels where they're going to be where they are going to have that video. So again, make sure that you stay tuned for that. And it's going to be interesting. It is really going to be interesting to see how all that plays out. And of course, thanks so much for tuning in to this video with me, and I will see you next weekend recapping all of the opening round matchups for the Crossroads schools, as well as showing you my updated bracket after each individual round. Cannot wait to dive into all of that later next week. Thanks so much for tuning in. And again, make sure you stay tuned for those videos later next week. Thanks so much for tuning into this video. Have a great rest of your week, and God bless.